Hello, Mr. Spock or Spock Talk. I am making an off-the-cuff response to your video, Why Men, and then in brackets, Women Should Still Marry. I should have liked to have scripted a response, but I don't have the time. I'm working overtime this week, and quite frankly, I'm exhausted. Even as I speak, I am near collapse. But a subscriber of mine pointed me to this video. He sent me a link, and I feel somewhat obligated to respond. For a variety of reasons. I think you're misguided, for one. I also think that there's a lot of obfuscation going on. Specifically, there are omissions that are present. And I think ultimately you're offering dangerous advice to men. Now, by the looks of you, I do have pictures, you seem to be quite young. And politically speaking, I would imagine you're a sort of a right-wing libertarian of some sort. Or a right-leaning libertarian, else why would you be endorsing marriage? That said, I would like to proceed ahead, and I'm going to try to address some of the points, or some of what I see some of the omissions. And I will be posting links, but like I said, I would have preferred to have scripted this, but I just don't have the time at the moment. So let's first go on about, start with the very concept of marriage. Now, you begin by saying that marriage is a rational choice, and then because of their health benefits. There's a little more background to this. Let's look at the United States. And I understand you are concentrating solely on the Anglo-American sphere, and that's fine. But let's look at marriage with respect to the United States. The United States, despite all claims to the contrary, still remains very conservative in some respects. And I don't mean that in a purely political sense, but more in a traditional sense. Marriage is held to be sacrosanct still, by those on the left, and by those, particularly those on the right, but certainly by all people in general. Not all people, most people, that is the tendency. Marriage is considered a sacrosanct and hallowed institution. It has the backing of society, and it corresponds to societal norms for a variety of reasons. It's been around for a while, and in the United States in that regard is still quite conservative. So marriage is sort of necessity endorsed. It's seen as a good thing. Whether it's a good thing or not remains to be seen. More importantly, I find it ironic that you as a libertarian, you call yourself one, and for the record, I am a nothing. I like to consider myself a nothing because I don't see myself as being on the right or left. I just like to look at things as they are, politically speaking. That you fail to mention that governments love marriage. Why do governments love marriage? Because married people, in particular married men, pay much higher taxes, which of course is a big revenue generator when the government isn't selling weapons and arms to foreign countries. Well, that's another revenue generator for the government. Quite frankly, married people, married men, pay a lot more taxes, which means the government gets more money from them, which means they can spend more. The government can spend more money, which means, of course, the government's going to endorse marriage. In conjunction with the sacrosanct status of marriage in Anglo-American society, it's no doubt that there is going to be a societal-wide normative consensus that marriage is a good thing. And that's the starting point of all of this, I believe, and that's why I think there is an inherent bias. By contrast, because marriage is held to be sacrosanct and sacred and a good thing, the unmarried, particularly unmarried men, are held in opposite regard. They are not considered to belonging to the sacrosanct. The government doesn't like single men because they pay less taxes. They generally do earn less, and of course that's less revenue for the government. They also don't feed into the divorce court industry, and so on and so forth. So already we have a rather skewed approach to these things. The studies you cited, the approach that all these studies will take will be one from what I would consider positive bias, that marriage is a good thing. It's not starting from a point of neutrality. It's starting from the point even if it's subconscious, cultural, societal norms would dictate that marriage is a good thing, and let's find out why it's so good. Not, is marriage a good thing? The neutral position. This is simply not the position that's been taken. And in the same token, the position of the single person, particularly the single man, will not be held in high esteem. It's already been put in a negative light. So when you say that marriage is rational, the, because of X, Y, Z, you're missing the point that it has very little to do with the rationality. At least that's not the starting point. The starting point is that marriage is a normative and and esteemed institution in society at large. Whether people are liberals, conservatives, libertarians, or whatever, most people consider marriage to be a good thing, and that will inherently skew at least the methodology of any study that is involved in studying in looking at the results of marriage on health, and so on and so forth. Moving on. Some of these studies are quite dubious. I mean, you're using Fox News of all things. Fox News, a government propaganda, propaganda mouthpiece, to back up some of the things you're saying. But one thing I take issue with in your video is a very powerful omission. Namely, in all of these studies, it's married people, specifically married men. And let me say for the record, I'm a member of MGTOW. I'm not an MRA, but am involved in the men's rights movement. So my primary concern is men. I'm not very much concerned with women in this regard. That men live longer in marriage, and then married men live longer than single men. The problem is that single here, in none of these studies that I've looked at, and I haven't had that much time to look at it, and I won't any time soon, but the single is simply, and other people have brought this up, single is not defined. What does that mean? So for example, a man who was married for 10 years, yes, his wife divorces him, and then for the 10 years thereafter, subsequent to that divorce, he is single. He is classified as single, and he can be then integrated into such a study and be considered single as opposed to married. Now his health, his mental health, his financial well-being, all of these things have been affected by the divorce, and of course, he is in a poor state of mind and perhaps in poor health as well. That's not taking into account that he was married for a while and then divorced. So single is a fluid term here. It's not being defined, and that is a major flaw of all of these studies. What I advocate on my channel is that men pursue economic autonomy or sovereignty, however you want to put it, that they abstain from certainly marriage and all relationships in general, but certainly marriage. And the question I would have is, do any of these studies, and I will talk about another problem with these studies, take into account that men who were single, who never married, yet accumulated a decent amount of wealth over the course of decades, lived a lifestyle which was simultaneously frugal but also enjoyable. There was enough leisure time available to the single man, enough free time to pursue hobbies and activities he enjoyed, and really low to medium work hours where stress would be minimized. How many of those singles are taken into account in this study? It's likely impossible to know, but I seriously doubt that many of the men that, if they in fact had been taken into account, correspond to the sort of man I just described, the man who's gone his own way, who has a very conscious knowledge of going his own way, who has actually a philosophical approach to it, and incorporates certainly philosophical principles into that. I don't see that this, so single could mean anything. And for the most part, I think these studies are skewed because a man can be single after he's been divorced 2 times in 2 different marriages, and of course he's a miserable fuck. What else do you expect? So from my perspective, what I would like to see in such studies would be men who've gone their own way their entire lives, who've never been married, who have accumulated a decent amount of financial assets, who have plenty of leisure time, work low to medium hours, and pursue activities that they enjoy and just enjoy life at as they see fit. If how that would measure up to all these married men. And another problem with this study, or these studies, these alleged many studies, and the research I've done shown there hasn't been that many. There haven't been that many. Well, this has been done over the course of many decades. Once again, not only does it not take into account whether these men were divorced prior to being single and so on and so forth, but if you look at earlier decades, single men were likely to have less income to begin with because women marry up. We call this hypergamy. And of course, they're going to be more likely to be in a lower class income bracket, or even in the poverty line. So, right there. Obviously, a man living near or below the poverty line is not likely to enjoy the benefits of good health, whereas a man who is married, definitionally, at least until the divorce occurs, is probably going to be doing fairly decently financially, because women will always instinctively marry up. They're not going to marry a poor bum. It's just not going to happen. So another reason why some of these studies are just, I think, very skewed, and once again, single is not defined, and the reasons behind why the men enjoy the health that they allegedly do is simply not cited. Now, I'm going to mention another aspect, negative aspect of marriage for men here. It's from the Harvard Health Publications Medical School. Now, it does talk about the things they mention suffer from the same problems, and numerous studies conducted over the past 150 years suggest that marriage is good for health. More recently, scientists have begun to understand why married men enjoy better health than their single, divorced, and widowed peers. And they do say divorced, but I mean, most of these studies don't say what is a single person. It's not simply not defined. And there are some interesting things to this study that do not speak for the benefits of marriage. For example, men do not deal with bereavement very well. I'll quote, "Because women live longer than men, women are far more likely to lose a spouse than are men, but spousal bereavement is actually more serious for men, and a study from California tells just how serious it is. The study did not measure the psychological and socioeconomic burdens of bereavement. Instead, the researchers focused on another aspect of spousal bereavement, the mortality of sort of the surviving spouse. The study tracked 12,522 married people over a 14 to 23 year period. During that time, 1,453 men and 3,294 women lost their spouses. Subsequently, 30% of the bereaved men died themselves, while only 15% of the women succumbed. Healthy men who lost a wife were 2.1 times more likely to die during the study period than healthy men who were not bereaved." And so on and so forth. I go on. For one thing, men don't deal with emotional loss in marriage and relationships very well. It's the suicide rate is sometimes the highest after divorce, and comparable with things like post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that. And the same is said for bereavement. And as an aside, this goes to show how attached women are to their men. Not very attached at all. Men don't deal with it very well, and there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to prepare for bereavement. Death can happen at any time, and when a man does engage in marriage, he has to deal with the fallout from that. And the simple fact is, and I'll get to this point later, never being married is a solution because you don't have to deal with that bereavement to begin with. Now, it goes without saying that I'm sure most of these studies also took into the best scenario into account, the best of the best. Now, you don't even need to be divorced to have a stressful marriage. Once again, from this article here at Harvard Medical School, a good marriage can improve a man's health, but marital discord can take its toll on both happiness and health. In the MRFIT study of 10,904 American married men, for example, men who divorced were 37% more likely to die during the 9-year study than men who remained married. Similarly, a British study of 9,011 civil servants linked stressful relationships to a 34% increase in the risk of heart attacks and angina, and so on and so forth. It's stress, relationship stress, can lead to health problems as well. So the studies you talk about are really positing the optimal outcome, the best possible outcome. If everything goes very smoothly and everything goes well, then at least the studies claim men will benefit from this. Now, I don't know about you, you seem a bit young, but I've had my fair share of relationships, and I know you don't like anecdotal evidence, but to be frank, I'm doing this off the cuff to begin with. I tell you, the only stress I have in my life is work and occasionally money related as I'm working towards certain goals. That's it. When I had relationships, I had work-related stress and relationship-related stress. There were two jobs, in fact. I had whatever job I was doing, and then in the relationship, I was doing another job, trying to walk on the eggshells that relationships tend to consist of in order to make it quote-unquote work. Every married man I know personally is much more stressed out than I am, outside of work, I mean. And some of them are just downright miserable. They have no free time, and the list goes on and on. Having said that, we're going to move on to the next point. This claim that men, I mean, this was, I think, I don't know if it was intentional, but really an act of sleight of hand if ever I've seen one. Men earn more, and they're more likely to get a raise. Well, I'm going to ignore the raise thing. I don't have the time to address that, although it is somewhat interesting. They're more likely to earn more. Well, I wonder why. Why are men more likely to earn more in a married? Because they have to provide for at least for their children, if not their wives. That's a given. Obviously, that's the case, right? That's why they have to earn more. To earn more, generally speaking, you have to work more, which means they're working a lot more than their single MGTOW cousins. They're working more, they're earning more, but here's the kicker, The fact is, and I'll be posting links, that American women control roughly 80% of disposable household income, which means all the bacon the men are bringing home is not their own bacon. It's bacon that's being fried and cooked by the wife and the kids. So ultimately, what we want to gauge this concept of earning more by is not so much earning more, but how much of the money you're taking home is yours and how much of it is your own disposable income. So as an example, maybe a married man is, this is just totally random, earning 80,000 USD a year after taxes. Right? His wife has a part-time job and also works at home, but she doesn't earn a whole lot. Maybe she just earns 20,000 because she works very little and she has to take care of the children and what have you. So they have a combined total of 100,000 USD net. The single guy might only earn 60,000, but he's not spending money on the kids because he has no kids. He's not spending money on his wife because he has no wife. In the long run, who has more disposable income? And remember, say this guy has a 2-year-old and a 2-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. He needs to provide for both of those children at least until 18, and oftentimes well into the mid-20s, as the tendency is these days. So who in the long run is going to have more disposable income? That's the real question, not whether he simply earns more. that's, well, it's a moot point, because so what, he earns more. He's also working a lot more. Which is why, in general, and once again this is anecdotal, I'm deeply skeptical of these claims and these studies that cite that married men are healthier than unmarried men. Which also leads me to believe that these unmarried men, these single men, were living below the poverty line and have taken and not following a what I would believe what I would call a MGTOW routine. How is working longer and more hours in the office, and of course you're earning more, not controlling the lion's share of your disposable income, particularly in the household, but in general, how is that equatable with less stress, and how is that equatable to a more enjoyable life? It simply doesn't add up. I mean, all these studies claim these things, and yet if you think about it in any here you go, rational fashion, how can, if you are, say this married man is working 70-hour work weeks and the unmarried guy is only working 40 or maybe even 30. I mean, he has a lot more free time, more disposable income. Almost per force, he's going to have lower stress levels. It just doesn't really add up. So I wanted to address that point as well. Moving on. There is other. I'm not going to endorse any sort of relationship, but there is a copious amount of evidence, it seems, that suggests there is not really a great deal of difference between cohabitation and formal legal marriage. Now, I find it once again ironic that as a libertarian, I assume a right-leaning libertarian even, you would endorse the state involvement in this the relationship between people. Now, I don't endorse any relationship, but if I or someone else is going to have a relationship, it better be outside of state jurisdiction. Now, it's a little bit complicated with cohabitation because often after a certain period of time has expired, depending on the country or even the state within the country, in the case of the United States, you may or may not be considered a couple, and thus there could be all kinds of impositions imposed on you depending on how the state views your particular relationship status in that regard. But that said, from what I've looked at, and I'll be posting a few links, most of the data out there suggests that there's not a whole lot of difference between formalized legal marriage and cohabitation. So what's the point? If you are going to pursue a relationship with a female, why get married in the first place? It's not very rational if you get the same benefits from cohabitating. And potentially at least very few of the drawbacks, such as divorce and what have you. And there's another thing that happens in marriage and in cohabitational relationships. Men become isolated from their friends and family, and this has been shown, I'll be posting a link, to have negative health effects as well. Men who lose their male friends and don't enjoy a male friendship anymore are more likely to suffer from illness and even die. My biggest issue, my biggest beef with your video is this claim you make that you can somehow, through what appears to be to my mind, a magical selection process, make it so that you can effectively make the divorce probably of not getting divorced 90%. I don't really know how you came up with this figure, but you did. You threw it out there. Now, all of this is predicated on your claim here, divorce, that if you undergo a rigorous process of mate selection and I suppose dating, then you will be able to optimize it, and you'll have a low risk of divorce. And then there's the 2-in-1 thing, which I don't want to talk about because, and I'll get to that in a second, but let me first address this. This process of elimination, or however, very few people can do this. people are deceptive. It's very difficult to judge character sometimes, and most importantly, people change. You can throw all of that into the mix, and this pseudo formula that you've come up with is not likely to work. It relies on so many probabilities and so much chance. If you grow up in Topeka, Kansas, you're going to have a lot less access to just people in general, specifically partners of the opposite sex, than you do in New York City or in London, UK, or in Tokyo, Japan. It's just, I mean, they're geographical. I mean, there's so many factors you're just not you're not taking into account here. More importantly, the issue is less the two-in-one claim and more the fact that women, the vast majority, initiate divorce. This has been consistent, and I'll be posting a link to this since the 19th century. It's been attested since the 19th century. I think it was 60%, and depending on the state you're in, it can go as high as 90%. So the major concern to men is that women are the initiators of divorce. This is true across the globe with virtually no exceptions. And my biggest gripe with this whole you can filter out everything and then sort of insulate yourself against divorce is it doesn't talk about the perfect storm divorce scenario. What do I mean by the perfect storm divorce scenario? By that, I simply mean a economic crisis, for example, such as the one that hit several Asian countries in 1997, which in some of them, particularly South Korea, which I'll mention, I'll be posting a link to a video where I talk about this extensively, had a devastating effect on marriage. In fact, the divorce rate just shot through the sky due to the perfect storm economic scenario. Now we have to keep in mind the corollaries of Briffault's law that past benefit provided does not benefit does not provide for future association, and past benefit does not provide for continued association. So once these Korean men paid their debts, so to speak, and the shit hit the fan, the women got up and left. I mean, that's what women do when pressed. When the going gets tough, women get up and leave. The perfect storm scenario is something that you simply can't factor into all these sort of controlled factors that you mentioned, education and so on and so forth. I mean, it's simply not true. No individual man has an influence on the macroscopic scale in the economy, and we've experienced the same thing in the United States with the Great Recession, as they like to call it. I encourage you to look at some of the divorce rates for 2008 and 2009. It is true that up until that time the divorce rates had been slightly decreasing over time since the 1990s, and have a look at that. But the point is that the perfect storm, economic storm, will reveal women's true colors virtually every time, and that's irrespective of education and all these other criteria that you cite as being incredibly important, such that you can insulate yourself to a 90% degree of certainty against divorce. I simply don't understand how you came up with that figure. And quite frankly, the best argument I have against all of this is that it's still a risk. I mean, you can't say 100%, whereas you can say that the single man going his own way can be insulated against all of these things to a 100% degree. Well, I could create another analogy. What you're saying essentially is there's some spot out in the ocean where and you can go pearl diving. These pearls are worth millions of choose your currency of dollars or euros. The problem is it's shark infested. But on the other hand, if you use a sort of a chainmail mesh diving suit and you go at a certain time of day, then there's only a 10% chance you'll be eaten alive by the sharks. Okay, so you're down diving there, and you're all protected, and all of a sudden, the perfect storm, but in this case, a sea storm, a typhoon, sweeps through the area, and you die in the typhoon. I mean, these are things you can't control for. You have to, and you can't necessarily factor in in advance. Shit happens. And that's the problem with all of these pieces of advice you've been offering, is that shit happens, and there's no way to control for that. And it's always a risk nonetheless. And once you take on that, even if we were to grant credence to your claim that it's 90% insulation against divorce, that the result of that is that you're still engaging in risky activity, being married. Whereas being single, you totally negate that risk. So I might make a scripted response to this, or a scripted general response to a lot of these claims that I hear, but for the time being, this is going to have to be what it is. I just don't have the time. I'm exhausted, and I got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning tomorrow again. No, 5:30. Shit. Anyway, I hope you're gracious enough to accept a response, even if it does not agree with your premises, and take care.